Thiru T.K. Rangarajan told him. I feel very shy today, which I had never felt earlier. Because to talk about a person who had achieved so much in his life and served the society at large, to be accounted in a very short book. I say it is a short book because compared to his vast experience, it is too small to narrate all that he had done to the society. An unexamined life is not worth living. Often I remember this Socrates say, because examining one's own life is very difficult, particularly by examining while writing on one's own life. I can speak for hours, but if you ask me to write a few lines, it is very difficult. Unless you distill your thought, you cannot write. Therefore, writing on one's own life is so critical because one has to be critical of one's own experience. And this what makes autobiography very interesting for most of us to read. Often we read autobiography to understand one's life. But often we also understand that autobiographies are often described as backstare of history. Because history is something that we come to know only through men of these achievements. As you read this autobiography, you never see TKR in it. Because if I had a soft copy of this book, I wanted to search how many times he used the word I. It would have been very few. Because we see, as he describes the work that he has seen or done, and never claims that he has done something. It is what he has been experiencing and trying to explain to us the time, the contemporary experience that was suffered by others. And he never puts forth his suffering before others. And that is why this autobiography stands apart from other autobiographies that we generally read from politicians, where they often list their own achievements. Here we rarely see such narrative. And when you read this, often from chapter 2 onwards, first he prepares the reader to listen to certain things which would come later in that chapter. For instance, when he writes about his trade union activities, he would give a very long narration of socialism and communism as an idea and how it is developed in 1700 and 1800 and taking it to the 1900 today. So unless you give this conceptual framework, it is very difficult to understand the type of trade union activities that he had been indulged later on. So this sets the standard of an autobiography anyone would write. He has set a very high standard for others to do that. Because as I said earlier, he is absent in this whole book. Often we see the world around him, not Mr. Rangarajan in it. And this humility is what makes us to read it continuously, as many others have described, that as they started reading, they didn't find any event for us to lay the book down. It is so interesting. Secondly, I have not read the Tamil book, but the translation is so wonderful that as I read every page, I understand that it was TKR talking to us. So this translation made that whole experience so simple. And I often tell my students about writing, because writing is like seeing a swan in a pool where the swan will be gliding, and whereas the feet will be trembling behind it. So when the writing is simple, there is so much of hard work behind it, and particularly this translation, though I have not read the Tamil, obviously as translator explained earlier, the Tamil book was so good, and of course he also explained how difficult it was to carry the same tenor in this English version as well. Thank you very much for giving us this translation. And secondly, when we read his experience in trade union activities, we understand that often he doesn't hide the lessons that he had learned. Many others have also narrated all that. So how he fumbled in a few instances, how he was corrected by his leaders at that point of time, and certain other times how he bravely took decisions contrary to the advice that he had received from his leaders. So this is a mix of learning and experimenting with activities. As one learns, often we are told that we'll have to listen to the leader and go on along the path. But leaders are also developed only when they experiment with new ideas. And that is what we have seen in his narratives on trade union activities, where in many places he has experimented on new ideas while dealing with labor issues. When it comes to issues relating to economy, once again he sets a narrative of how to visualize the changes in the post-90 situation. Because post-90 is seen as a time period where communists and socialists are found to be misplaced in India because they were no longer needed. And often I remember what Mr. Chidambaram once said in later part of 1990s, that there is no other alternative to neoliberal policies. So this narrative that Mr. TKR has set in this chapter tells us that no other alternative is not true. Rather, alternatives exist, and one such alternative is the social policies and programs that we still have. So that reminds us how he has taken pains to prepare the reader while narrating his experience as Member of Parliament. During those days, I have met a few times, and he was very keen to understand even the very minute details of an issue. I had an experience in explaining to him the statistical system in India. The questions that he raised at that point of time made me to think further into those issues. I came back to him explaining certain other things because I had to read many questions that he had raised. So all these things could come only from a committed listener, reader, and a leader. And those things were very apparent when he interacted with me. And often he showers a lot of love and affection on me because he feels that certain times I helped him in his work relating to the Member of Parliament activities in 2 other committees that he had been. I strongly believe that leaders like him would continue to inspire others, not only of his contemporaries but also youngsters. And a book like this should be read widely, and it has to be circulated very much, even beyond the boundaries of this country, to understand not only the achievements of TKR. As I said earlier, he is visibly absent throughout the book, but what is that this movement has done to this country, and how he had been a very big part of that movement over the last 50 years or so. And therefore we understand that the movement is much longer than individuals who have been part of the movement for more than half a century. I thank you all for listening to me till now, and I thank, and my birthday wishes to you, sir. Thank you very much for this opportunity.